It's Mr. Whippy. All this and more coming up on This Week in Retro.
High-resolution color graphics.
This land of high technology.
The revolution in technology that made the information age possible.
Those kids are not afraid of computers.
Jonesing for Indiana Jones. Clean that dirty floppy.
All these enthralling stories and more coming up on this week's show.
Up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.
Good morning, Neil. How are you?
Morning, Dave. I'm good. Are you ready to be enthralled by this week's show?
I am,
go big
as
at the
always.
top. Yeah.
It's always brilliant.
Yeah.
Amazing stuff. How are you?
I'm good. This week is a big week, perhaps the biggest of my life, and I can talk about it because when the show goes out, it will have happened. Tomorrow, we face the final panel, the final decision, the final healthcare professionals, social workers, all the other people that will be staring back at us on the Zoom call or Teams call, and they will decide our fate if we get the final green light for the adoption. And if we do, I think haven't shown you the schedule yet. We've got a draft schedule, so if it goes ahead, it's all guns blazing. It's 6 a.m. at the kids' house, breakfast, staying there all day. It's going to parks, it's play dates, and everything that's involved in transitioning them into us being their parents. So it's going to get busy, but we've got to get that green light first, and it's all happening tomorrow. So wish us luck, everyone.
I'd say fingers crossed and wish you luck, but it's going to happen, Neil. It's going to happen. I understand why you're not taking it for granted, but it's going to happen. And I am thinking of you.
Thank you.
And I hope it doesn't overwhelm you.
Yeah, it's been an 18-month process. It's taken a long, long time. So we've spent that whole time not trying to go, it's going to happen, because we've had to employ so much patience through the whole process. So finally, I think if we get the green light tomorrow, we will at last let ourselves believe and let ourselves go with the excitement.
I think that's entirely reasonable how you've done it, but I've had no doubt about it at all. But there you go.
So that's my big news. In actual retro news, which people actually tune in to hear about, Sega Terra Drive. I've been working on the video, the second part of that. It was a very popular video, the first part, not working. Have managed to get it working this week. It's been a long old slog to get it going, which is why the video's a little bit delayed and all the other stuff that's been going on. So I'll have that finished this week, and I can't wait to have a tinker with it because I've got chatting to a developer who has been experimenting with the crossover between the PC and the Mega Drive side and has created some proof of concept demos, which I can run and we can understand a bit better how this thing works compared to an Amstrad Mega PC, for example. So that's going to be fun.
Because the Amstrad Mega PC is one or the other. There's no real connection between the two.
It's a Mega Drive on an ISA card. You run that or you run the PC. Whereas the Terra Drive, it's got a Z80, it's got the 68000, and it's got the 286 CPU all on one board. And then, spoiler, I've put a Pico Mem in there. So now it's also got an ARM CPU in there as well. It's all things to all people. So that's going to be fun. And I've got straight after this today, I've got an interview with that developer to just chat to him and get a bit more technical information for the video about what he's been doing. So that'll be fun. Yeah. What about you, Dave? What's your week looking like?
I've unexpectedly sorted out a New Year's resolution. A New Year resolution that I made on here was to spend more time reading blogs. I wanted to read blogs. I thought that was a nice thing for me to sit and do. A bit of mental peace and quiet was to read a blog, but I couldn't find a way to do it. I was trying and struggling to get various different apps on my phone to convert blogs into a format that I didn't need to sit and read in front of a computer, because I wanted to get away from sitting and reading a computer, and I couldn't get it to work, and I put it to one side. I bought myself a new e-reader, so an electronic ink e-reader, and I knew it came with this thing, this Pocket app, and I wasn't too hopeful it'd work, and it works amazing. All I do is I click on the Pocket icon in my Firefox browser on a web page. It grabs the page, turns it into a book-readable format, and my new electronic ink reading book, grabs it and puts it on there, so I can sit and read blogs in a book in my hand. So the one I'm really been looking forward to reading is the CRGP Addict, which is a guy that started in 2010 playing every role-playing game.
Wow.
In chronological order, and he's done over 500 and reviewing them.
What a genre to say I'm going to play them all.
I know.
Pick the longest games possible.
Yeah, so it's amazing being able to sit and do it not at a computer screen. So I'm glad that New Year's resolution has happened. But Neil, why are you sitting surrounded in junk?
Junk, including a pair of wooden clogs. Yeah, this is because I've spent the last few days clearing out the spare room, painting, decorating, and all the rest of it for the kid that might be coming along and needing a room. So everything's been dumped in this room. So I'm sorry, Duncan, you can't have any shenanigans with me this week with the green screen. For those who are on audio only, I am sat in my usual room, and this is what it looks like, only less messy normally, but I've got a green screen behind me.
Yeah. I bet you've just challenged Duncan to do it, because he can do it without the green screen. Just not well.
It's going to go overboard. Yeah, and my granny's wallpaper behind me there. Lovely. Right, we got some fun stories this week. Shall we get into them?
Yeah. Back in the 80s, the highest grossing movie franchise was Indiana Jones. 3 fantastic films and my favourite pinball table. I don't know if we're going to try and get a correction on that highest grossing movie franchise, but I had a look at a list of what they grossed and I added it up. And because there was 3 films in the 80s, that seemed to win. My gran and grandpa took me to see one of the films in St Anne's near Blackpool. Probably the only 2 hours that I would have been not begging for 10p's to play in arcade games, because St Anne's and Blackpool are full of them. George Lucas was behind the Indiana Jones films, and his company Lucasfilm decided to get into video games. They had growing success with games like Rescue on Fractalus and the Eidolon, and then with the tie-in for Labyrinth, the David Bowie film, and a game called Habitat, which I only found out about this week, which was some sort of online meeting place. Neil, I think you know a little bit more about it.
Yeah, it came up in conversation on Discord, didn't it? And I mentioned it. It will look familiar to anyone who has played Labyrinth, or perhaps the later Maniac Mansion, which a lot more people will be familiar with. It has that distinctive LucasArts or Lucas Games, as it was in earlier days, look to it. But Habitat, that was made in 85, tested in 86 on something called the Quantum Link service. And I think the people behind it then went on to do AOL later. So it was sort of an early AOL, if you like, dial-up provider. And Habitat is what we would now recognize as an MMORPG, an online virtual world. I think it was tested for a couple of years, then it shut down in 88 because it was too costly to run. But really interesting, definitely 10 years ahead of its time. And, you know, people could meet, people could chat. They had little speech bubbles. If you look at the screenshots of people meandering into the same scene and chatting away to each other, I think I would have enjoyed it. And I think there was a later recreation of it, an open source creation called Neo Habitat. So I think it's possible to try it out, but you can't beat trying it out on a real C64, can you? And some dial-up.
There wasn't an actual game in it, though. There wasn't an adventure game in there. It was just an online meeting place. Is that right?
I think there was quests to do. Like I say, I haven't actually played it. I've only read up on it, and it jogged my memory when we were chatting the other day. But I think there were some goals to it. You carry on chatting, and I'll try and find out for you.
Sure. So their first Scum game, Maniac Mansion, not their first adventure, but the first one with that engine, which was made for that game and then went on to do all the other games afterwards.
Do you have that problem where you call it Manic Mansion? Because for years, in my head, it was Manic Mansion, and then I was like, no, hang on. It's actually Maniac Mansion, and I still slip up. Yeah,
Maniac Miner and Manic Mansion. Zach McCracken came next, and then their first foray into flight sims, which would eventually become the X-Wing series, which was Battlehawks 1942. 1989 saw George finally let his game company take on some of his very precious IP. He'd started out with the rule that they know they're not going to get Star Wars and Indiana Jones straight away. And it was Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade tie-in game. Actually, no, tie-in games, because there was two. There was the action game that nobody really talks about, and no wonder, because it's nothing really special. And then the game that is special is the adventure game. So graphically, it's a step up from Zack, which was a step up from Maniac Mansion, which was a step up from Labyrinth. You can see they're refining their process as it goes along. And it came 1 year before the two kind of big breakout LucasArts games that people talk about, I think, the most, Loom and Monkey Island. And I think the quality had been going up, and they'd been getting technically better until the first indie game, and that let them tell better stories. Now, reviews don't actually agree with me. Reviews say they were consistently good, but I think that's because you can't review a game against what's going to come out in 5 years' time. And the games, when you look back at the earlier ones, they just aren't as good as the kind of the golden era of them. It wasn't the last adventure with Indie that they did. They went on to make another, and I think a much better game, in 1993 called Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis. So this came after Monkey Island 1, and again, in my opinion, the better game, the sequel Monkey Island 2, I felt that's a much better game than Monkey Island 1. And it's clear that they were polishing their craft, their gameplay and storytelling. The graphics, of course, are improved too, quite a lot, in fact. And this time it's not based on an existing Indiana Jones movie. It's a new one.
I want to say that there was a script or something to do with Fate of Atlantis that never became a movie. Do we know the source of the story?
I read at some point that it was based on a rejected screenplay. But I then read that it was supposed to be based on that rejected screenplay. They didn't like the rejected screenplay, so they created a new story entirely.
That's probably a reason why it was rejected.
Yeah. They introduced a new gameplay element where you can play cooperatively as two characters, or just Indy alone, favouring action or favouring puzzle solving.
Yeah, the first one had that fist fight element, which was a very clunky... I mean, it worked, but it was very clunky, wasn't it? You didn't have that in the second one.
I was thinking, as I was looking into this yesterday, I was thinking about point-and-click games. They kept introducing things to kind of spice up point-and-click games, and we don't talk about them, and they were all almost universally bad.
Yeah. Operation Stealth had this scattered throughout, and it was awful. And it was just a question of, right, save my game, try and get through it, restore, try and get through it. It was torture. It
just was. It was at cross purposes to the point of the adventure game, which is kind of relaxed sitting there, and then you've got all of a sudden you get this arcade sequence.
But I do get why they had to try it with Indie, because Indie is an action adventure. You know?
Yeah. The action bits in Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis weren't terrible, though.
No.
Whereas Operation Stealth, So they got this right. The game was very well received. It sold well, and it got great reviews. After this, they've done a few platform games, actually quite a few. None, I think, are particularly notable. A desktop adventure games, which was randomly generated, and I didn't like because there was no sense of exploring something new or finding a story in it. There was nothing like that in it.
And it was in Windows. It was in a window in Windows. It felt a bit like an application.
It was supposed to be a kind of a diversion from your work, I think.
Yes. Yeah. And there was a Star Wars one, wasn't there? Or a Yoda one.
Yeah, Yoda Adventures, and Luke Skywalker's Adventures as well, I think, or was it the same thing? And
there was also a little later, there was the Infernal Machine. Do you remember that one?
Yes, I remember that. That was quite similar to another game that I can't remember the name of. You know, the one with the cartoony graphics where you had to try and get things to work?
Oh, I thought you were going to say the one with Lara Croft in. I thought you were winding me up.
No.
Cartoony graphics. What was
it? What was the one we had to solve? The puzzle solving game where
you're going to have to narrow it down a bit more than that, Dave.
You had to fire balls across, and there was mirrors and bouncing things.
The Incredible
and drums
Machine.
And, yes.
No, the Infernal Machine was it was a 3D. Yeah, it was 1999. It was 3D. It was like Tomb Raider.
So what am I thinking of then?
You're probably thinking of the Incredible Machine, but just from the
Was
title.
there not an Indiana Jones game that was like that? No, have I made this up?
What? An Indiana Jones game
have.
like the Incredible Machine?
Yeah. I thought they'd they'd put that skin on it. I guess I must have made it up. So the Infernal Machine, I thought that's what Infernal Machine was.
No.
Oh, I'm misinformed. They came back with Emperor's Tomb in 2003, a kind of a Tomb Raider game. I'd like to get around to play that because it was very well received. And ironically, Tomb Raider is a bit of a knockoff of Indiana Jones, so it's nice to see the circle complete where Indiana Jones says, look, Tomb Raider's doing very well, let's knock that off. Staff of Kings was a bit more from that genre, but unlike Emperor of Tombs, it was very poorly received. There's a couple of Lego adventures, I've never looked at those.
Were you thinking of Indiana Jones in the Lost Kingdom? That's a puzzle video game for the Commodore 64, came out in 1984. Now, I can't say I've played it, but it says gameplay requires the player to think like fictional archaeologist Indiana Jones to solve the puzzles on each level, as the game does not provide the player with any rules or gameplay information.
No, I at some point, someone's told me that the Indiana Jones the Infernal Machine was that incredible machine with an Indiana Jones kind of theme to it. And clearly it's not. And I've never checked or challenged it. I've just assumed it's sat there in my brain for 20 years incorrectly.
Yeah. Okay.
But the reason why we're talking about today is a submission from Big Blue Lou with new footage from the old cancelled FMV Indiana Jones game. It was supposed to be set in 1947, so this is later on. It's an older post-war indie with the Soviet Union and a finale set in South America, which is the direction the films ended up going on anyway.
Yeah.
The footage, though, it looks rubbish, laughably bad. I don't want to see this bad. Terrible. FMV was a period where games were trying to bring the movie industry into games, and they didn't do it so well. Some of it has aged really badly, and most of it has aged quite badly, and some of it has only aged poorly. I don't think there's any that's really aged well without context.
And if anyone was going to be able to do it, it was LucasArts. That, you know, they had all the resources you could possibly need to make FMV work, and if they weren't going to do it, then you know what chance was there? I know there's some examples where it did work, but do you know what year this was?
No, I don't.
Okay, because the early ones were particularly bad, and they did figure out ways to make FMV work, or to tone it down and use it as cutscenes, or in the case of Under a Killing Moon, really make it work. I thought that was a great game. I think that was probably the pinnacle of FMV games for me.
Yeah.
But this one, I've watched it, and it really does look like someone's gone in fancy dress as Indiana Jones.
it is quite early. It was eventually cancelled between late 94 and early 95.
Right, so it was an earlier one.
I can't say exactly when it was, but this is quite early. And I think FMV games, there was a boom caused by games like The Seventh Guest, and then spiraling costs and having to cram them onto multiple CDs. And it turned into a bit of a bust. And I'm sure there would have been lots of projects like this that were cancelled halfway through when the enthusiasm waned for them.
Yeah, or when when they realised the development hell that was having to film every single outcome to make it less of a linear game. I mean, it's not easy. Yeah,
I mean, this is definitely a development hell game, and there's a link I'm going to submit. I'm going to give Duncan, which gives you much more detail on it, other than the clips. But are you an Indiana Jones fan?
Oh, yeah. Quick update on Habitat, first of all, because I said I'd go and look it up. I can't see anything that suggests there were objectives in the game. All I can see is that when it first came out, the developers were very keen for it to be completely open in how you could communicate and what you could do. That led to absolute chaos, and some rules were put in place. That's all it says. And then beyond that, I think it was just meet and chat and come up with your own adventures within the mechanics of the world. Yeah. Am I an Indiana Jones fan? When I first met my wife, I put her in my phone as Liliana Jones because she was an archaeologist and a history nerd, and I liked that. And Indiana Jones was the first thing I thought of. And I like them. I mean, even the more recent movies that are considered a bit terrible or pretty terrible, I still watch them and enjoy them.
They're okay, aren't they?
Yeah, I still enjoy them. The first indie game that I played was Atari's Arcade, which I thought was insanely cool at the time.
The sound in it is great.
Had the music, had the speech, didn't it? Had the minecart scene, which was really cool. And then later when I could play and emulate that, I did realize the game was a little bit repetitive. You just kind of loop through the two styles of gameplay, but still fun and still feels cool because it's indie and indie is cool. The Last Crusade I had on the Amiga and Atlantis on the PC. And like you said, they were peak indie for me, which is surprising because it's such a big franchise and you'd expect it to have as many good games out there as Star Wars, for example. But outside of those select few games, they never really quite nailed indie.
Yeah, I wonder if they just slapped the IP onto just a generic game.
Because side by side, as you mentioned, you had the action and you had the adventure game. And in both cases, there was an action game for Atlantis and The Last Crusade. The Atlantis one is a bit less well known. The Last Crusade, for example, the action game on my Amiga felt very much like an 8-bit game mashed into a 16-bit system. And it was on the 8-bit platforms. And Atlantis, the action game, was on the 8-bit platforms as well. That was more of an isometric game. Both didn't really work, but the adventure games absolutely did. Yeah, and it's interesting that it's the point-and-click games that worked because, as I mentioned earlier, it is an action movie, but the action games are just too clunky or simplistic. So how do you deliver, is my question, how do you deliver the perfect Indiana Jones game that balances action with storyline? And the answer, as you mentioned, was Tomb Raider. But by the time they'd sussed that out and they tried it with the Infernal Machine, things had moved on again, and it just kind of felt, do you think, like a clunky Tomb Raider by the time it came out, Dave?
So I never played the Infernal Machine, obviously.
Yeah.
But the thing that you didn't mention about Indiana Jones is the discovery and the wonder that you got from the films.
Yeah.
And that is so important for them, that the idea you see these historical artifacts and you see them come to life on the screen. So that's so important for it. And Tomb Raider does have a bit of that going on.
Has nice cut scenes and presents a new area to you. And
you do feel as if you're exploring, and you do feel as if you're going somewhere new.
And it should have worked, but it was 1999 by the time they brought that out, and it didn't feel quite right, didn't feel quite finished. I haven't played the later one that you mentioned. There was a later 3D one that you mentioned.
So there's one I want to play when I looked into this. There's one that I like the look of, and it got very good reviews, and I think it might even be getting a remaster.
What's it called?
Which is Indiana Jones and the Emperor's Tomb.
Yeah, maybe I should try that one. Maybe that one will put to bed my annoyance at the Infernal Machine. So for me, my perfect Indiana Jones experience remains Scum VM, Fate of Atlantis, my laptop, and that's it. In fact, I used to play it in exactly that way on an old Asus netbook. It was ideal. But moving forward, what would be the perfect indie game? I think a sprawling open world game where bandits ambush you at a dig and you chase them down on a horse, maybe while they're shooting at you from the back of a vehicle around pyramids, something like really dramatic like that, with that, like you say, sense of wonder and discovery. But that needs to be done on the scale of a Rockstar Games production. It deserves that level of treatment, I think.
Rockstar. I was thinking Bethesda.
Oh, but Bethesda.
They're not too distant, are they?
Yeah. That kind of, amount of money put into the production and the development. That's what it deserves.
Yeah, and if there's an IP that could justify a huge amount of money, then it's this. So we'll link in the show notes for the 4-hour interview at the time point with the clips, so you don't have to watch the whole thing, and also a link to what happened to the Indiana Jones game called the Iron Phoenix, which is what this game would have been called if it had come out and they hadn't changed it. So Iron Phoenix was the name of the Indiana Jones game, that the FMV one that was cancelled. There is a strange thing happening this week, Neil.
Okay.
This month has 5 Saturdays in it.
Wow.
So we have our normal sponsors. They get 2 a month each. And we've got a 5th week and we don't have a sponsor for it, Neil. So what are we going to do?
Wow. Let's fill the gap, Dave, because did you know that shop.heba.co.uk has a sale on right now where you can buy...
A sale right now?
Right now. I said you buy one.
What can I buy?
You can buy...
What can I buy?
You can
Tell me.
buy the Aegon
Tell me what I
Console
can
8.
buy.
You can buy the accessories for your multi-system. You can buy the control dock and use your Super Nintendo and Nintendo controllers with super low latency on your USB devices, as well as DE9 and Neo Geo pads with the control dock.
But what if I want
Classic.
a mug with my face on it?
Well, if you want a mug, you can go to rmcretro.store, which is my gift shop for the museum, where you can buy a selection of books.
The museum. The museum. How can I get to the museum?
Yeah, slow down there, Dave. You can go to my store, rmcretro.store, or if you want to come and visit the museums, you can go to retrocollective.co.uk and you can buy yourself a ticket.
Hang on a minute. This is all about you. Where's my sponsor? What am I sponsoring?
Tell me,
here?
who are you bringing to the table today?
Dot and Johnny.
Dot and Johnny. This episode...
I'm advertising Dot and Johnny, best cats in the world.
Are they for sale?
No.
Okay, so this episode is sponsored by shop.heba.co.uk, retrocollective.co.uk, rmcretro.store, and Dot and Johnny.
Fantastic.
Thanks for your support, Dot and Johnny. Dave, is there a game that you've always wanted to play but never had the chance to? Perhaps it's Indiana Jones and the Infernal Machine. Perhaps it's not emulated. Perhaps it's not dumped. Or maybe it's something with unique controls that don't translate to anything but the original system and you just can't get the experience. I, for example, would love to try out Sega's Time Traveler again. It's a game that's regarded as being pretty awful. It's pretty linear in the style of Dragon's Lair in how you interact with it. But I haven't seen one for 30 years, and it used to be in our local arcade, but it presented video footage in a unique way as a hologram using a system of mirrors and whatever else, whatever witchcraft it used. It genuinely looked like a hologram, and it was brilliant. And that just can't be replicated at home. For Jeff Pfeiffer, though, in his article on Remind Magazine, which makes me just think every page is, do you remember, Dave?
Yeah.
do you remember?
Do you remember Juan Bars?
Do you remember Dirt? Do you remember
Remember White Dog Poo?
Remember White Dog Poo? Do you remember?
Do you know why that is?
It was to do with bone in the food, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah.
Yes, yeah. Ground up bone. Anyway, thank you to Pajako for submitting this story. And it's all about a game called Killer Shark. It's briefly shown this game in the 1975 movie Jaws, where we can see a little bit of gameplay footage of a player shooting at a realistic looking shark before the camera pans around to follow Roy Scheider as he goes down onto the beach, preempting what's to come later in the film, the danger of the shark in video game form. Now, this game was made by Sega in 1972, and despite appearances, it isn't actually a video game. It's an electromechanical game in which a shark is projected onto the playfield, and if you shoot it with your harpoon gun, which is mounted in front of the playfield on the cabinet, the shark kind of looks like it's hit and is thrashing around, and that's because there's a wheel of slides that are projected, and that wheel then spins to play all the different frames, and that's complemented by an 8-track player for the sound, so it sounds pretty good as well. I've never seen this arcade in the wild. Have you ever seen one, Dave?
No.
And watching footage, it reminds me a lot of those 80s tabletop games where there's a rolling scenery at the bottom of the screen. That's the seabed rolling along.
I'm thinking Tomy things.
Exactly.
The Tomy things you held up to your eyes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there is actually a Tomy-tronic game called Shark Attack. And the way the shark moves in that, the way it sort of flits about is very similar. So if you imagine Shark Attack in a rolling seabed, you've got the game in your head. It's quite striking. And of course, on a much larger scale. The eagle-eyed who have seen this clip, which I don't know if we can show because we're not really going to get permission to show a clip of Jaws. I don't know. We'll see how daring Duncan's feeling this week. You'll also spot that there is a computer space, a yellow computer space in the lineup of arcades next to it. And Sega also made a game called Sea Devil, which it turns out is exactly the same game of this, but it's got a manta ray instead of a shark. So it's just got different art and different slides. And that probably speaks as to the reason why we've not seen these, why these don't really exist anymore, because it's based on old film slides. They probably perish, probably just disintegrate, and that's the end of that. Now, I must admit, I was hoping that this article would turn into a journey by the author who would hunt down and finally fulfill his dream of playing Killer Shark and a 50-year mission to live out his dream. But it really just kind of carries on talking about shark games and then fizzles out this article. But it's still an interesting read nonetheless. It goes on to talk about Atari's 1975 game, Shark Jaws, which is really interesting because that game, which is a video game, it's considered to be the first ever movie tie-in video game, only it's not actually licensed. It's called Shark Jaws. It's not called Jaws. And I think they tried to get the license and it was either too expensive or they just couldn't get it. So unable to secure the license, Atari called it Shark Jaws, but the word shark is deliberately tiny and the word Jaws is deliberately massive. So people would just see the word Jaws on the game and naturally assume that it was the movie. They didn't get sued, so I guess that worked out for them. And go on, Dave.
Yeah, there was a period where people didn't get sued for games. There was if you look at 8-bit games in the 80s, all of a sudden, I don't know which year it is, whether it's 83, 84, 85, all of a sudden, they had to stop naming games after arcade games and movies.
Yeah, they got away with it for a while, didn't they? They didn't get away with the technology. Obviously, Ralph Baer, with his patents, was hammering anyone and everyone. But when it came to ripping off movies or ripping off arcade games, it was fair game until people got a sniff that there was money to be made here, like big money to be made here. And at the time, Atari, well, either I don't know if it was due to the fear of being sued or because of exclusive distribution deals that existed that had migrated from the pinball world into the video game world. Atari released the game under the branding Horror Games instead of Atari. They did something similar with Key Games, and that was all to do with distribution. I
was going to say, yeah, that's not the only time they use a different brand name, yeah.
In fact, that was to do with distribution, but they also presented Key Games as a competitor, and they even said that Key Games were poaching Atari engineers and, they were going head-to-head to kind of create this narrative of false competition, which worked in their favor. So that's a whole other story then. Anyway, like I said, the article doesn't really have a satisfactory conclusion for the author, but it does offer some interesting tidbits of information for shark game enthusiasts. And leads us to our question of the week, Dave. What's your favorite shark-based game? No. We'll come up with something more interesting than that. But it is an interesting...
Do you want me to answer?
Go on then. Have you got a favorite shark-based game?
Ultima 4.
Is there a shark in it?
Yes. Yes, there's sharks in it.
Do you jump the shark?
No, you get sharks in the sea. There's sea monsters. Okay. And sharks are part of that, I'm sure. Or Ultima 5. One of them has
a shark. There you go. But, it's not I wouldn't call that a shark-based game, though, Dave. That's a game with sharks in it. God, we are going to make this our question of the week, aren't we?
No, we're not. Ultima 5, there you go.
It is an interesting transitional phase of gaming where electromechanical games stand side by side with the first video games, and they still hold their own while video games remain quite simplistic in their nature. It is the kind of game that Computer Space, also seen in the scene, and Pong, they were fighting to win people's coins over these electromechanical games side by side. So really interesting phase of video game history, which begs the question, Dave, have you had a chance to actually play, I know you haven't played this one, but many electromechanical games in general?
I must have done, because I was in arcades as a very little boy. So I must have been around when these electromechanical games were still there. It's certain that I did, but I don't remember very many of them at all. I don't remember. I've got vague memories, which I'll come to in a minute. And while I'm very curious about how they work, when I've looked at the sheriff that the Arcade Archive video has been on, it's amazing how they do things with all these kind of all the various wires and so on. You're just expecting to see a PCB with microchips on it. There's not. It's amazing. I don't find them compelling as games.
I think you mean Gunfight, do you? There is Sheriff is the video game. Gunfight
Sorry,
is
I mean
the
Gunfight,
tabletop.
yeah. I'm going to get everything wrong today. That's my job today. Everything wrong. Next week's corrections will be enormous. So yeah, I do mean Gunfight. Thank you for correcting me. It's amazing how they work, but they're not compelling as games. And I don't think that's too much of a criticism of them, because they were not meant to be games that we play now where we sit down for hours to play them. They were meant to be stick your 5 pence in and have a quick game on it, have some fun, walk away before you get bored with it.
Yeah, even if you had seen them when you were a kid, it would have been in the context of them being next to Ghosts and Goblins and Elevator Action and Indiana Jones and things like that, rather than just being the only option in the 60s. There were no video games to compare to. Yeah. It would have been them, and it would have been pinball.
Even games like, Space Invaders, if I happen to walk somewhere they've got a Space Invaders, I might stick some money in and play it for a few minutes, but I won't sit and play it for long because the games don't grab you for that long. I never felt the addiction.
Are you doing that for the game, or are you doing that because it might be the last chance you get to experience it?
It could be, but just there's Space Invader. Are you suggesting that I'm going to be killed?
No, I'm suggesting that the game might be stuck in a museum behind glass where you can't touch it anymore.
No, I get that, but it's later games like Galaxian and so on that grab me better than these. But I remember that there used to be a fair that came to our town once a year. And there's now a retail park where it used to be. This fair in my head was massive. I'm sure it wasn't massive, but it used to come to my hometown, and they had arcades, and I remember it being older stuff. I remember the horse racing game.
Yeah,
where you would all
the Kentucky Derby,
and the horse would
place your bets.
That kind of thing's electrical, mechanical. They must have had loads of other things.
Yeah, that's a good one. We had that in our arcade. Now you mention it, and they had little stools all the way around it, and you could sit and you could place your bets. That was very distinctive.
And I also note that there's not that many electromechanical stuff going about compared to Golden Age arcades and later than that into the 90s with the Capcom stuff. Certainly nothing like as much. So I guess it must be fairly universal that the electrical mechanical stuff is much more difficult to maintain and rarer and not quite as interesting.
I think the last bit you said there, not quite as interesting, might be an important point, because I've never heard anyone say, I'm really nostalgic for XYZ, and that's a mechanical game. I've never heard anyone get nostalgic or, I used to always play this down at my arcade, and it's never. I heard plenty about video games, but not electromechanical.
If we're going to go back to Indiana Jones, to the first story, and talk about the sense of discovery and exploration, for me, almost all the games that I really love have that sense of discovery and exploration. And how do you do that in an electrical-mechanical game?
Well, yes, it's almost has the same problems as FMV games had later.
Yeah.
Very linear in what they can present.
Yeah.
But they do get very imaginative in the way they do it. Just quickly, Dave, going back to Jaws in particular, do you remember when you first watched Jaws?
It would be on the television. We were on the TV. We taped it, and I wasn't that impressed with it.
Didn't put you off going in the sea?
Oh, no.
I got to play quite a few electromechanical games when I went to the Flipper Museum in Budapest some years ago.
Flipper's a dolphin, though, not a shark.
Well, yeah, that is true. But I didn't get to play the shark game in particular. And there is, of course, a connection between pinball games and electromechanical games in their maintenance and the way they're made. But the one that stuck with me was Sega's Grand Prix. That was from 1969. Top-down racer with a rolling road track that just went around permanently on a corner for some reason. There were no straights, so it was just going round and round and round the track. And you were steering a car from the top down between the competitors' cars, just trying not to collide with them. That's it. Just don't collide with the competitor's car. Had awesome sound. I presume it was an 8-track or some kind of looping audio in there on a reel, but it sounded amazing. And it played quite well as well. But apparently, this is for the author's benefit. If he really does want to go and play Killer Shark, I've read that there is one in the American National Arcade Museum, which is a fun spot in New Hampshire. So go there, try it out, and conclude your article, Jeff. Go and actually play the game and tell us if it was all worth it. And for everyone else, to stay safe on the beach this summer. The threat of Jaws for me, I know you said it didn't affect you, Dave, but for me, never left me. It never really leaves you once you've watched Jaws. I can't get in the sea without thinking about it at least once.
I could befriend a shark. I'm sure they'd like little chin rubs. They'd be my little pal in the sea. I would like to, if anyone wants to go in the comments and make an emphatic defence of electromechanical games being great fun to play, I'd be very interested to hear someone's thoughts on that.
Yeah.
Housekeeping.
It's your favourite part of the show. Is there any housekeeping to be had?
We will start off with a correction.
Do you think we'll get a copyright strike for that?
No. What do you mean? It was entirely original.
Just Duncan leave those in. I'm never sure. I've not been back.
He did once, I think, just to wind you up.
Oh, you feel free, Duncan. If you do want to use my jingles, just send me the royalties.
We'll start off with a correction. Board a Go-Go says that just because Neil stated NVIDIA wasn't the most valuable company, it decided to increase its share price just to prove him wrong. So this is on the back of the AI boom. And I think you did see it this week, Neil, the mouse with an AI button on it.
Yeah.
Oh, it's all going to go wrong.
Why?
What's going to go wrong, isn't it?
AI is the buzzword, so let's put an AI button on a mouse.
Just cram AI everywhere.
I guess it's going to be like the Windows start button that appeared on keyboards because there was a start menu, because Windows is now forcing AI on your desktop as part of the OS. You got to have a button, so let's put it on the mouse. Let's accidentally bring up AI mid-game when you're just about to get a headshot.
Yeah,
it's what we all want. I use hang on, I've got the box here. I use a Microsoft ergonomic mouse, which has as few buttons as possible on it, because it infuriates me. Have you got the same?
No, I've got a Ducky Secret, which has 2 buttons on the side, which I very, very rarely use, and just the normal buttons apart from that, because I just don't use them. It infuriates
me when I'm using a mouse and I accidentally knock one of the zillion buttons on the side of it and it pops something else up. I just want nice, simple... God, I'm being a moaning old man again. Nice, simple mouse that doesn't give me RSI.
Old men again, yeah. Never mind
mouse.
That.
Just give me a tank mouse.
Let's do nice stuff, Neil.
Let's do nice stuff.
I would like to welcome a magnificent 7 new patrons this week, so thank you very much for signing up. First, we have Reese. Yes, that Reese.
We have Benjamin.
We have Nathan.
Colin.
Andrew.
Cubicle Nate.
And Matthew. So thank you very much for signing up. You've all joined just in time to see the third and final part of our Patreon Q&A session.
Yeah.
Quite enjoyed doing that.
And we do need to schedule the next one, which we discussed being about a certain system, memories of a certain system.
Yeah, we're waiting on our feedback from our patrons to decide what we'll do.
Yeah.
Pete Davison was inspired by our discussion last week to write a detailed blog entry on the youth of yesterday. Now, I'm glad that we did come across as sympathetic and positive. I don't like the idea of us just bashing young people for being young people.
Yeah.
We saw that when we were kids. I am a grumpy old man. Neil's less grumpy than me, but we're both grumpy old men, but at least we realise it's not right to revel in it. So if you want to read what Pete has to say, there is a link in the show notes. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Pete.
it's a really interesting blog post that he did. And he also touches on what really stood out for me, the innocence and the safety, even if it was a fake safety slightly, of the early online days, and how that soured for him and how that reflected real life situations for him. It's well worth a read. So and also his YouTube channel, which I think is This Is Pete.
Yes,
is his channel. Well worth subscribing.
He does go deep into games. He's very interesting channel.
Duncan Styles has he messaged us with a few things. What was it? Oh, a message that was received. I think it was was it a DM or it might have been a reply on
So
last week's
it was
show.
a DM that Duncan received on Reddit.
And it says, "Hi, I started regularly listening to the show a couple of months ago. I wanted to thank your listeners this week for mentioning 2 games that I designed, Colin McRae Rally and Jonah Lomu Rugby." And that's from Andrew, a.k.a. Commander Coda. So it's brilliant to think that that was based on a question of the week. You gave your answers. It turned out the designer of some of those answers that you gave was actively listening. And he says, thank you. So brilliant. Yeah. And Andrew also said, I left Codemasters shortly after it was complete. I'm not sure which game he's referring to.
It must be Colin McRae's Rally.
To explore new game types, but ended up working at Attention to Detail, where I made more racing games. And a lot of the features in Colin McRae Rally 2 were in the design of Colin McRae Rally, but they ended up on the cutting room floor, so to speak.
No, they didn't end up on the cutting room floor. So he did stuff for...
In the first one they did. In the second one, at least they didn't end up on
after he left, it made it into the second game, so it didn't end up on the cutting room floor.
Oh, Andrew, maybe we can have a chat sometime. Maybe there's a tea break there, because I loved Colin McRae Rally, and I'd love to learn a bit more about Andrew. Anyway, cracking on.
I did notice a nice review from FPA Gamer. It says, best for retro, genuinely the best retro podcast on any platform. Neil, Dave and Duncan provide a top-notch listening experience. They provide a great summary of the retro news from the previous week, as well as deep and entertaining dives into the topics of the week. Highly recommended.
It's all AI. We're all AI, but thank you.
Thank you very much, twirlers, listeners, commenters, reviewers, responders. The weeks go by very quickly, and it's a fair bit of work doing this every week. So your kind messages give us the inspiration we need. You're the power up that keep us going.
News in brief, Dave. So these are the stories that we don't go into detail on. I have to say, and this is not the listeners' fault whatsoever, news this week was a little bit light, wasn't it? Not too many to pick from. Sometimes you have weeks like that. Yeah,
there's still plenty there, but in previous weeks there's been so much there, too much there that we can't cover it all.
So maybe people have been enjoying the sunny weather, but we would ask that whenever you see a cool, interesting retro story, head to reddit.com/r/This Week in Retro. Bung a link there, and we'll pick it up either as a story or maybe in briefs, and it will generate lots of nice discussion.
You can also go there whenever you like to have a look at what's already submitted and have a browse through when you've got some time to kill. The top submission this week is from Starcade 2024, and it's about our friend Mark Fixie Stuff. He's explaining how things are hard for him, but he's not giving up, but having to adjust and downsize. Poor old Mark.
Poor Mark. I did worry when I first saw that. It's like, oh no, it's another YouTuber that's giving up, but it's not that at all. He's just making the changes that he has to make to keep bringing us the content, and keep supporting him because he's a great guy. A submission from Hoona 2097. It's a party political broadcast from Count Binface. He sings a song in front of arcade games and makes references to those arcade games, and it's a good bit of fun. I don't know if you get this in other countries or not, but here in the UK we have, I guess, spoof people that put themselves forward for elections. They are spoof in the way they present themselves, like Count Binface, who is a giant intergalactic bin, or Screaming Lord Such, who is just a lunatic from, used to be the Monster Raving Loony Party. Is it still that? Yeah. I can't remember.
It is. Still that around.
But you can vote for them. You can legitimately vote them in if you want to. And they do a really good job of just highlighting the stupidity and the absurdity of some of the things that real politicians do by going head to head with them, and it's always fun to see. That's democracy, and we love it. Go and watch Count Binface's song.
From Squelch411 is a post that the Scion deserves more love. I don't know anything about the Scion, but one day I'm sure there'll be a story where I have to research it. It's a link to Abort, Retry, Fail, which talks about the Scion and gives you more information on it. In fact, I'll hit the button to add that to my e-reader, and I'll read that later. That's what I'll do.
V. Bolkaran-Xbox submits a story about a June 2 remaster that's in the works for the Amiga. Which one? No, there was June 2 on the PC. There were two. There were two different June games on the Amiga. June 1. What was?
So there was two. There was Dune 1,
which
on
was
the PC and Amiga, and there was Dune 2 on the PC and Amiga.
I thought it was.
Yeah, no, they were both on the Amiga and PC. They were developed by Westwood Studios.
They were, weren't they?
And Westwood Studios used Amigas.
And on the Archimedes. It came out on the Archimedes June 2. Anyway, it's a real-time strategy game, as you know, the granddaddy of not quite them all, but one of the earlier ones, and that set the tone for things like Command and Conquer. And it did grab the spirit very well of the David Lynch film. Very different game to the original Dune, as we just mentioned there, developed entirely separately. And Robert Kuhn, one of the original developers, said of the Amiga game, it wasn't as good as it could have been. The game shipped on 5 discs and suffered from extensive disc swapping. And the intro scenes from DOS were cut down on the Amiga version, the soundtrack too, and it was never released as an AGA game. It was on the original or OCS or ECS chipset. And gameplay was cut back a bit. So it's nice to see that a remaster for the Amiga is being made to add all of those features back in and more.
Yeah, it's a great game. I still prefer the first, the French one rather than the Westwood one, but that doesn't mean Dune 2 is a bad game. It's by no means a bad game. Don't Have a Scooby has shared a Facebook post from Alan Miles saying that Bruce Gordon, the creator of the Sam Coupe, has passed away. Alan Miles calls him the smartest guy he's ever known.
I missed that news. That's really sad. The Sam Coupe is a wonderful machine. So thoughts to Bruce Gordon's family and friends. Pocket 386 comes back again after a burst of activity from YouTubers a little over a year ago when these things appeared. Bajako has submitted an article from this year about them. So it looks like they are available again. Did they go out of stock? Were they hard to get hold of? I think
they went out of stock. All the YouTubers bought them and they went out of stock, and then the YouTubers were releasing videos on things you couldn't buy.
Creating demand, unable to fulfill them.
Yeah.
I mean, they're fun little things, but I just know it's the kind of thing that it will end up on the shelf. I couldn't bring myself to buy one.
Yeah.
But it's fun that it exists. Yeah.
HRH6502 lets us know about a bug in the Lunar Lander game code. So this is not the arcade game. This is the PDP-8 game written in Focal, which gave the output as text status updates on teletype. So it's a missing divide by 2, which made things wrong. So this is a strange game where you, if you imagine Gorillas.Bass, except with no graphics.
It's you can actually play it on a lot of platforms, and it works surprisingly well. So you have time, you tell it how much thrust you want to use with each sort of step. It's almost turn-based. It is turn-based. And with each turn, depending on your thrust, your velocity towards the ground changes, your fuel gets burned, and hopefully you can end up landing the thing or crashing it. Or not, if there was a bug. Yeah. G7VFY lets us know that Lynn Conway has passed away at age 86, a ripe old age, if I may say so, of a heart condition. Lynn Conway worked at Xerox PARC and created the VLSI. So thoughts with Lynn's friends and family also.
Also from G7EFY, archive.org is reportedly in jeopardy. Now, I'm not sure if this is a bit of scaremongering or not. I've not had time to look into detail. I read about it that there some difficulties with books that we covered before. They were lending out more than they should have done during the pandemic, but also they have an exemption to the digital, the Copyright and the Millennium Digital Act, whichever the DCMA or whatever direction the acronym goes, that they have an exemption from that comes up every few years to be renewed. I think it might be related to that. It's coming up for renewal. I don't know if there's if there's much to this, if it's a bit of scaremongering or not, but archive.org is such an important thing. It would be terrible if we lost it.
The stories, or the information linked on that story, goes back to December of last year, and then another one April of this year. So it's not entirely new news, but it also doesn't surprise me. The things that are hosted on archive.org, entire ROM sets, for example. Something we'll give at some point. But Jacko tells us Nintendo are now going after channels that make sheet music of their game music. Controversial. Can you transcribe the theme tune to Zelda and sell it as sheet music, or give it away as sheet music?
Apparently not.
Or is that
apparently
infringing?
not?
Is the performance copywritten, or are the notes on paper? I'm not surprised. I don't have particularly strong feelings about that. If you're gonna, let's say I wrote down Tina Turner's music, Dave, as notes, and I sold it to you as a book for you to sit down at your piano and play Nutbush City. I think that would be clearly a copyright infringement, don't you?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So I'm not too riled up about that one.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair enough. Although it's a bit of it's not why they make the games in the first place. So it doesn't seem as if it's that detrimental to them. But we know that Nintendo are famously litigious. Christ, why don't you submits the story of Captain Blood on the Atari ST. It's a classic where you track down and murder your clones 5 times. It's a very weird French game, loosely inspired by a novel about a seafaring Captain Blood. It certainly impressed me as a kid. It starts off with Jean-Michel Jarre music, and it sees you flying through space and then landing after going through a vector landscape, which when you stop gets filled in and looks really cool. And then you need to converse with weird aliens with icons and strange voices, lots of spacey effects and blowing up planets and trying to just track stuff down.
And moving a finger around a screen, an alien finger.
Yeah, this is a Eurogame article on it, which I've clicked the button for Pocket because I've not read yet. I happen to know a bit about Captain Blood. It's a really, if you peel all the layers away, there's not much to the game, but that's not the point. The point is that all the layers are there. Jean-Michel Jarre music, all these blah, 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 speaking aliens and all the rest of it. It's quite fascinating. Did you interview one of the creators of it?
I spoke to Francois Linné once. Yes, interview with him. He went on to do Stos and Amos and all of that stuff.
Yeah. Fascinating stuff. And there's loads more. There is loads more. Neil says it's not that big a week for us, but there's still more that we don't have time to cover.
Is there a story about Scotland's result?
No, Neil, there's not a story about Scotland's results because it's too soon for Scotland's result to be a story submitted to Twitter because it's not retro.
Okay.
Although Scotland being good at football is retro because we're terrible. We deserve nothing. We were absolutely rotten. We played 3 times. We deserved nothing from any of the 3 games we played. We did so well to qualify and we're left with bitter nothing afterwards. Our fans were great. Our fans deserve better.
You can repay me when England get knocked out.
I hope England get humped on penalties, Neil. I've mentioned Rob Smith before, and it's because he's a very nice man, but also because he's amazing. He goes to work on things and he pulls off amazing stuff.
He does. I mean, if you've got a problem, he's got the cure for it, hasn't he?
Yes. Thanks for saying that. I was going to do that later on, but you've done the Cure reference already. He is the guy that made Retro.Directory, which is the global listing of all things of retro. We've mentioned it before. I haven't mentioned it for a while, but we'd urge you to go and use it. It's free. Nobody's making any money out of it. And it helps you find things near you. And you can also add things that aren't there. So if no matter where you are in the world, you can go on retro.directory and find retro-related things near you.
Shops, museums, arcades. It's brilliant. Yeah.
User groups, clubs, all the rest of it. He's also made the drawbridge for the Amiga. So this is because the Amiga uses a weird disk format, so you can't use Amiga disks in a normal floppy drive. By using that, you can convert your USB floppy drive to one you can plug into your PC and use in an Amiga emulator, and more now. He's done more with it.
In real time as well. Yeah.
Yep. last year for Amiga Kickstart, and year 2 is happening today as this is released. So if you're at Kickstart, you're probably not watching this, are you?
You might be
You're
listening
going to watch
on
it
the drive
afterwards.
up there. Might be walking around with.
Oh yeah,
headphones on.
listening on the drive up. If you're listening on the drive up, I hope you have a fantastic weekend. It looks absolutely amazing. Loads of my friends are going. I'm not though. Chris is going.
He is.
Chris from the podcast is going. But last year for Kickstart, Rob took along his floppy disk backup station, so an automatic device to copy that floppy. Ignore the people saying don't copy that floppy. Copy that floppy.
It even had the "Don't copy that floppy" video would flash up when copying floppies. Yeah.
Since then, he's worked on more things. The last thing he did was disk flashback. So this is for PC, Amiga, and Atari ST disks, and maybe even more since I last looked at it. When you install it, you can use it to access floppy disk images as virtual drives. You can also use it. So the virtual drives you think of as like mounting an ISO in Daemon Tools, for example, but you can also use it to connect to a physical drive if it's a grease weasel or a drawbridge and access real disk in real time on that and manipulate them, add files, etc. to them.
Really useful. There's nothing more frustrating than just wanting to add some files to a system and you can't find a way to get those files onto the system. That's really useful, yeah.
But also for Kickstart, which I think feels like it feels as if Kickstart's already an institution. We've not even had the second one, but it's a thing now. So number 2 this weekend. Last year was a huge success. This one's bigger. Rob had decided to go one better than last year. So as well as the backup station, which he is bringing along, he's created an amazing new contraption. Amazing is a word. Over time, floppy disks are supposed to degrade. I've not actually seen evidence of this happening. I don't know that floppy disks degrade in the way it was predicted. They were supposed to lose their magnetic signal and fall apart, which limits their lifespan, but I've not seen that happening. I'm sure it's happened for a small number of them. I mean, it's not in any way impossible, but what I've seen instead happen to disks is either from poor manufacturing quality, where perhaps the hub comes off, or the surface delaminates, and that seems to happen more with late 90s discs than early 80s and early 90s. My theory there is they realised, hang on, these discs are really robust, they're lasting much longer than they should. We could cut costs on them. But more than this, what happens to discs is condensation, mould, dirt, hot and cold cycles because it's in the loft or in the garage. And that's where Rob's new machine might come in. So Rob's machine last year was useful for people who have, for example, still got their old computer art on a disk, their old mod files, the text adventure that they started to make, their old code, whatever it happens to be, that they've got on the disk that they can't access, that can't be replaced. Now his new machine might even help you to get that. It's incredible, and it's a machine that you put the disc in, it opens the disc, it spins it, it cleans it with a little Dremel bit dropping on IPA with heated air. It's amazing watching it. It makes me feel like an ape, though. I'm watching what Rob Smith does, and he's effortlessly breezing his way through creating this incredible machine from scratch, doing all the wiring, the programming. It's all in the video and the camera. There's no way I could do it. You give me all the time, I couldn't do this.
Oh, I think it's amazing. And the video is great. It takes you through the whole design and build of it. On the outside, it has what I think is quite an intentional Rube Goldberg look about it. It looks intentionally overly complicated and thrown together to perform a relatively simple task, that being to open a floppy, wipe it, which you could do with a cotton bud, blow some hot air on it as you spin it. But it actually does it very well, and it's, of course, really well thought through. And if I didn't know Rob better, I'd think he'd finally lost the plot. But he is a man with a good sense of humor and who doesn't mind sending himself up. And I just love the presentation of this whole thing. And behind it, like you say, effortless levels of skill and knowledge to make it all happen and to bring all of these different aspects together to make it work. Kickstart in general, I went to the first one. I made a video last year about it. Absolutely brilliant. Ravi pulled off an amazing event. Ravi Abbott, who's the man behind the event. I think everyone's going to enjoy it this year. If last year was anything to go by, I think he's hired a second floor, so he's effectively doubled the size of it this year. And for the after party, which was great this year, he's gone bigger again, bigger venue. I think Hoffman's there. He's got Pete Cannon there, who's a really great music creator who uses Amigas and Octamed and Akai samplers and things like that. I've always wanted to see him. I don't know if I'm going to be able to, because my attendance is very much down to what happens tomorrow with the panel. If we get the green light, I'm just going to be hammered with everything that I have to do.
You get the green light, yeah.
So I'm not going to be able to go there, which is a real shame, because Chris is there, who you mentioned. So if you see Chris, please get a selfie with Chris and put it on the Reddit and let him know he's a fake Australian and say hi from us. But also John Shawler's there. John is one of the hosts for the panels and things like that. So he's coming over from the US.
Boat of Car. John Boat of Car Shawler, who for anyone who's not aware, started this show with, actually started it as a podcast with Neil before Duncan Styles said, let's make it a show.
Yeah. So it's a real shame if I can't get across to see him. I did see him last year, of course, when he came to the cave, but I'd love to see him again. And Chris, he's over for some weeks and he has booked a visit to the cave, so I will get to see Chris at the cave. Yeah. But there's a chance I'll go, but if I go, it's because I've got bad news, so I probably won't want to go.
It's possible. I'm now thinking maybe there'll be a delay that lets you go to this, and that's not terrible news. It's not, yeah. Let's not dwell on that.
But anyway, everyone have a wonderful time at Kickstart. It's going to be great.
So this is part 1 of the video there. Rob hasn't released part 2 yet. So I asked him last night, did you finish it? Do you think it works? And will it be at Kickstarter as planned? And he says, I haven't finished writing the code yet, about 50% done. I think it will technically work, but not sure how effective it will be at cleaning. However, regardless of its cleaning, it will be good for drying after covering them in isopropyl. And I'll take it regardless because it's crazy. I would have planned to have it completed, but just got back from a week away. And he says, maybe I should name it after one of the Cure songs. I've already done that with my Mr. Floppy prototypes. Rob does listen or watch. I'm not sure which of the two. Hello, Rob. He's just amazing, just such an amazing thing. So have a look at the video. You'll be amazed with the mega montage of him making it. And if you are at Kickstart, have a wonderful time. I'm jealous I'm not going. I hope you all have a great weekend, and well done to Ravi for making such a wonderful event.
Time now for our community question of the week. And last week we were being grumpy old men, and we talked about kids these days not having a wide enough range of offline hobbies. And we asked, this of course was based on the submission by, I can't remember the listener's name. Was it Battle something?
Could be.
Battle Pratt. Submitted this.
Battle Pratt sounds good.
Battle Pratt. And he asked, are they consumed by a digital world when in our day we switched off BMX simulator and we went off on our actual real BMXs and came back when the streetlights came on? As parents, tell us about your kids' gaming habits and how they compared to yours when you were their age. Now, we got a lot of answers, a lot of very detailed answers, didn't we?
Yeah. If there's ever one to go and read, then this is it. Go and read it and read what people say. Really, people have put a lot of thought and care into this.
Yeah. So I think we just need to read out the top ones. Have you taken it out of contest mode, Dave?
Yes, I have.
Okay. So top answer comes from Generation Pixel, who says, speaking personally, of course, video games have had an extremely positive effect on my 2 kids. I've had controllers in their hands from the moment that they could hold them, which I couldn't deny as my dad popped a Pong clone paddle in my hand back in 1978. It set me on the path to a hobby I've loved every day since. But what I believe makes their particular journey more positive is that their old dad has been there with a guiding hand as they've navigated the world we get to explore in gaming. And yes, while they were younger, they played games such as Fortnite, Minecraft, and Roblox, or Roadblocks, as Reese calls it. But I was in the games with them. or over their shoulder participating as a backseat driver or heckler at times. This, I feel, has given me and my kids a level of social interaction unheard of in my day. And now that they're in their mid to late teens, they are swinging more towards narrative-driven single-player experiences
Good on
that
them.
we can watch each other play or just chat about when we're in our respective games. So yes, I think video games can be massively a positive influence, especially when the parent is a gamer too. And I could go on for ages about the experiences we've shared. Oh yes, they still go out in the real world for healthy social interaction, probably much more than I do these days. So that's a really nice positive story. Yeah, it's true. My dad was not a gamer.
No.
As we said, gamer wasn't really a word that was used in the 80s. You went to play computer, or you went to the arcade. There would have been parents who were gamers who had grown up in the 70s playing video games down at the arcade, but it wasn't something that you did socially with your parents, was it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I really like this answer because it's the perfect kind of antidote to the pearl clutching games and a waste of time. You're ruining your eye, all that nonsense you hear about it, and to hear something that clearly experiences that are enriching is great.
A shared interest that you can bond over.
Yeah.
And because that generation before has had that experience, you can relate across generations and find common ground. Again,
I've said this is the third time saying it today, the sense of exploration and wonder you get from games is unique. And it's incredible. And being able to share that and give that to your kids is great. Tech Made Easy UK has a shorter answer. He says, my daughter's favourite game on her iPad is Day of the Tentacle Remastered. I'm raising her right.
Nice. Now, the next one is quite a long answer. Shall I just rattle through it, Dave, or shall I try?
Go through it. Go through it.
This is Gunnar Warhorse, who says, I'm a 55-year-old teacher in a primary school, teaching 9 to 10-year-olds, and have 2 grown-up daughters who both enjoyed video games growing up. How kids today interact with games and gaming systems is complex and at the same time simple. During lockdown, many of the kids benefited greatly from meeting up with friends on Roblox and Minecraft, Fortnite, etc. Many of my classes still enjoy outside pursuits, including sports and bike riding/scooting, in addition to gaming. From my observations over the last 30-odd years of teaching, the biggest factor on how children are impacted by gaming is parental supervision and involvement. Children that have unrestricted and unlimited access to gaming exhibit shorter attention spans and often interrupted or shortened sleep patterns, in brackets, usually boys. This impacts their learning and well-being greatly. Parents that can say no to their children when needed, put structured time limits on gaming, and supervised or limited access to social media. They tend to be more self-disciplined, happy, and productive children. Gaming can be a great way to collaborate with and spend time with children, as we heard in the earlier answer, showing an interest and participating, in the same way you might build Lego together. I've also noticed how games and programming apps like Scratch have been a great way for some children with ASD to express themselves and succeed, which they may feel is denied to them in other aspects of life. Trends in gaming will continue to change. Older generations will continue to feel that their day was better. Children will continue to gain a great deal of fun from it. Balance is key, and that needs to come from parents. Children do not usually have the self-discipline or self-control to manage it themselves. My goodness, most people in this community still probably lose a healthy, balanced approach to gaming from time to time. Yes, I think we're all guilty of that. I stayed up far too late replaying Fallout 4 the other night on a school night. These are just a few simplistic responses to the question at this time. I feel more concerned about the impact of social media on our young people.
Yeah,
really
I think that's
good answer. And I'm taking tips from that. Thank you very much.
Quite a balanced game.
Everything in moderation.
Yeah, Stewpot Seb says, my 2 daughters were never massively into video games until they discovered Fortnite. I joined in as I saw a bonding opportunity, and honestly, that year or so where we played wherever we could was magically. Us as a trio against the world was probably the most fun I ever had in my gaming life, which says a lot.
Yeah.
Roblox.
Oh, sorry, Dave. Carry on.
Roblox. I wonder if that's Habitat. That modern Habitat is Roblox. Mm-hmm. Roblox is big for my aspiring 5-year-old gamer, but she was always happy to go out and play in the garden too. Other than the immediate nature of gaming now, I don't think the underlying essence of it has changed much.
Yeah. There are some other great answers. Roblox comes up a lot. Minecraft comes up. Tortor points out that Roblox is a game engine, and others also point out that there are coding elements within the game. So there are educational aspects and opportunities to learn coding and things like that within the game. These are much more complex beasts than the very simple games that we used to load up and play in the 80s. You know, you shouldn't take them all at face value. And of course, the social aspect. Just imagine how wonderful and important games were during lockdown for kids to socialize. Yeah. So important. Yeah. So there's that as well. Loads of wonderful answers. Do go and have a read. It's just brilliant. I mean, that whole thread could be a case study, couldn't it? You could pick so much out of that and come to so many different conclusions. And there's so many.
I'm just glad it's positive and honest and balanced. I just tire of all the stuff in the media that games are bad and all the rest of it.
So from that very in-depth and interesting question of the week to this week's question of the week, what's your favourite shark game?
Yeah, what's your favourite shark game? Tomb Raider was a knockoff of Indiana Jones. Shark Jaws was a knockoff Jaws game. What other games are blatantly ripping something else off, be it the title, the cover art, or the game itself? What game is definitely something else in everything but name?
Yeah, we want to hear about your rip-offs. It's been a slightly longer than normal show. Thanks for sticking with us and listening. I hope you enjoyed the show. All the links to everything we've spoken about is in the show notes. Dave's already waving because he needs the toilet. So I'm going to make him wait a little bit longer. Go to patreon.com/This Week in Retro to support the show, to catch our patron Q&As and other exclusive content that we will do as and when we can get round to do it. We don't make any promises on the quantity of stuff we put out there. Make sure you're subscribed. Leave us a review. Discord.gg/RMC Retro if you want to chat with other twirlers in real time. And of course, reddit.com/r/This Week in Retro for absolutely everything else. Okay, I better let Dave go now. He's double waving. Thanks for watching, everyone. Bye-bye.
And Neil's waving now. Bye-bye. See you next week. Bye.
This Week in Retro was presented by Neil from RMC The Cave and Dave. It was produced by me, Duncan Styles. The podcast version of the show is available through your favourite podcaster, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And the video version is available on the This Week in Retro YouTube channel.
Join our community subreddit at r/This Week in Retro to suggest and vote on the stories we cover on the show. If you watch This Week in Retro on YouTube, please give us a like and subscribe to help us reach new viewers.
If you enjoy our show and would like to support it, then please check out the link to our Patreon page in the show notes or description. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time for more up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.